Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I am your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Shmuel Siegel. You know, after his service as captain in the Air Force, Shmuel received his bachelor's degree in psychology and business. Currently, he heads CSN Commercial's investment sales team and is a certified investment real estate acquisition and due diligence specialist. Shmuel closed numerous deals nationwide and is focused on adding maximum value for his clients. You're going to hear in this interview, Shmuel's a broker, and you're just really hearing his side of the acquisition process, thinking through the different things about the seller and the buyer and things you're going to want to know as you are maybe selling a piece of commercial real estate, but also as a buyer on the commercial real estate side, even thinking through that, submitting an LOI versus going directly to a very detailed, as he said, very thought out purchase and sales agreement and some of the pros, and cons of that. And so some great tips today if you're just anyone in the commercial real estate business. Also, he talked about shifting their big shift from retail this past year to multifamily. And some of that. So interesting how, we just have to be flexible as entrepreneurs. Shmuel's a great example of that. I know you're going to enjoy the show today. Shmuel, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the real estate business and what your focus is right now.
Absolutely. So I got started when my father, who has been in the industry for maybe 25 years, asked me to help him a little bit in some deals he was putting together in a legal sense, of course. And I was seeing what he was doing and kind of shadowing him and said, wow, I'm absolutely in love with what you're doing. And decided to kind of get my license and do it by myself as well. My father has been doing retail real estate, and that has been my niche as well. He was concentrated mostly on leasing, so landlord rep, tenant rep. And I also loved the investment sales part of the business, which I did get involved in. During the pandemic, retail was not doing as well. So we decided to shift over a little more into multifamily, which is how I got into that space a little bit more. And here I am today.
Nice. Well, tell me a little bit about that shift. And why don't we talk about that just a little bit while it came up, as far as the pandemic and that caused you all to really shift your focus altogether. It reminds me of the book, Who Moved My Cheese? I don't know if you've read that, but a great little book. It's like the cheese moves, right? And you got to figure out how to find it. You got to be able to go somewhere else. You got to be flexible as an entrepreneur. And that's sounds like a great example. Just so the listeners know, there's a great children's version of Who Moved My Cheese. I read it to my children all the time. Definitely should look it up. But Shmuel, tell me about that shift. You all been in retail for sounds like a very long time. That was your father's focus. You really shadowed him and learned that industry. But then it's like, okay, that's not working right now, or it's slowed down. We gotta be able to shift. Got to move. What were some of the difficulties around that decision making process to making that happen?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, it sounds like a good book, and I'm definitely going to check that out. Not to misrepresent the status of the market, because you can't paint retail with one brush. There was a lot of essential retail, big supermarket, grocery anchored centers that were doing great. Starbucks, fast food restaurants, drive-thrus, doing great. But deal flow was not moving as much. So as a broker, doing those deals was difficult. And the reason was a lot of companies were suffering. Tenant mixes were changing drastically. Sellers wanted to sell at the regular price when buyers wanted a discount, and there was a huge discrepancy there. So getting the deals done, getting leases signed was difficult. Like I did mention with the tenant mix, if someone is coming in for certain synergy between the tenants, all of a sudden someone files for bankruptcy, he's losing a tenant that was supposed to be his neighbor. Now there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think uncertainty was the name of the game during the pandemic, because we did not know how long it's going to be, what's going to happen, how long it's going to be closed, when you can open, and finding that threshold of when you should come in and take advantage of the situation was difficult. That threshold did come along in around January 2021 when retail did start coming back because we kind of saw the end. We had the vaccines, they were working, and things were doing great. So during the pandemic in 2020, we're thinking to ourselves, okay, retail's not doing so well right now in terms of deal flow for a broker. What can we do? And we decided to get more into the multifamily space. For us, multifamily is not as intricate or as complicated as retail in concerning to the leases and to the way you build a deal and how you kind of underwrite it. So if that explains it, that's how we got into that space. And I am familiar now much more with multifamily, which is, of course, to my benefit. The more you
Yes.
know, the better it is.
So it's pushed you in a different direction, and you're better off because of it. Now it sounds like you would agree. I mean, it pushed you to educate yourself about a different industry or the same industry, but maybe a different asset class. And learn and grow, and now you're even more prepared to do more deals and have more deal flow in two different asset classes. It sounds like. Tell us a little bit about how let's get into just like putting deals together as a broker, what you're looking for, how you're finding deals, and let's just help the listener to better understand that.
Okay, that's a very good question. I think it's very important for people to understand how these deals come together, the differences between them. There's a lot of talk today, off-market deals, marketed deals, what it means, a pocket listing. So as a broker, we always look to market our deals, except at a time when the owner chooses not to. Now let's go back a little bit. There's an owner, he wants to sell his property. Let's start there. If it's a distressed owner, and a distressed owner most of the time means that he has to sell because he's in trouble. He's going into foreclosure. He's not able to pay rent. He's not making rent. Maybe he already missed some payments. So that is a distressed owner. And usually those are the off-market deals, usually. Because when an owner has to sell, he would sell at a discount price because he just needs to get rid of the property. So necessarily, an off-market deal has to be discounted. It needs to be a good deal. And that's why people look for those off-market deals. The problem today is that you can have wholesalers who go to these owners, and then on top of the original price, they stack on that, according to the comps, a higher price. And then it's not even an off-market deal anymore because it's off-market, right, in parentheticals. And then that confuses a lot of people. When brokers come into the game, I would say 90% of the time, try to get an exclusive right to represent. That means that I am protected. My fee is protected. If I am able to make this sale happen, I will get a commission because this is my job. This is what I do for a living. And we don't just go to the owner and say, okay, here, this is the property sale. We do a lot of work for that. Getting into the work that we do is not relevant here at this point in time, which I'll be happy to talk about if you'd like, but we'd like to get that. Now, oftentimes brokers like to keep that as a pocket listing because the second you go out to market, you have a lot of buyers coming in, and some of them are completely unqualified. Some of them just want to see what kind of price they can get, and it could be a big waste of time. And I find a lot of sellers who prefer to work with a qualified buyer. He wants to have a fast close. He knows he has the means to get the close done and arrive at the finish line and close escrow fast. If they choose to do that, then we would go to our top 5-10 buyers that we have a relationship with, and we say, this is the deal, this is the product. Are you interested? If they are not interested and we kind of try to shop it around our network and they're still not interested, then oftentimes that listing would go to the market. Not to be misconstrued to other deals that go straight to the market, because the seller will tell us, I want this to be a competitive bid. I want people to come in and say, I want to have multiple offers. And that is good sometimes, because if there is a lot of demand for this type of property and people do come in at different offers, sometimes the price goes high. So that's kind of all the different ways that you kind of see deals on the market and off market and what those mean.
that off-market term often raises the price, right? You just assume there's this assumption that it's a lot better deal, right?
Exactly.
People say
that's a good
off-market,
point.
right? Or
That's a
or a
great
wholesaler,
point.
calls you and says, "Hey, I have an off-market deal." Or like, "Oh my goodness, show me that deal right now," right? But that may not mean it's a deal, no doubt about it. And you mentioned like just the work the broker does. You talked about talking about that a little bit. And I thought it's worthwhile because the broker relationships that we have are just crucial, right? Majority of our deals have come through brokers, and their help, finding a great broker, like yourself. It's going to be is difficult, right? But building that relationship where they're helping you through that closing process, they're helping the seller through the closing process and the buyer. It just helps the whole process in a big way. No doubt about it. Having that professional there to help you, especially when we're talking about large commercial deals, and so many moving parts. But what about? You mentioned, if you market it, there'll be lots of people, lots of buyers, things like that. I wanted to get your opinion on, as a broker, when you're receiving those offers, when you receive, maybe there's offers that are, $1 million or two less, than maybe the highest offer, but this is somebody that can definitely close. Where let's say that person that's making a higher offer is newer to the market, or maybe a newer operator. You're not sure if they can close. How do you make that decision on who really you're helping the seller really to make that decision as far as, these people can definitely close the deal, but there's another one here that's higher than that, but we don't know that group. How can you walk through that just a little bit?
Yeah, we'll start with a little bit of why it's good to work with a broker, and this is part of the answer. Is we've seen hundreds of deals, and I mean hundreds of deals, whether they closed, whether they didn't close. We remember why they closed, why they didn't close. We remember the buyers, we remember the sellers, and when you put those minds together, that gives you a huge opportunity and huge leverage on everything. So when I come into a deal and say, okay, show me the underwriting, show me the property, I can already say, okay, this is resembling to a deal I did at this time, a deal I did there, I did a deal in Florida, I did a deal in Texas, and you're able to put all these points together. Now, when there is a qualified buyer and he knows it's a good deal, you always negotiate a deal, right? It's important, right? But you always have to justify why you're going so low. If you're going to go to a low ball offer, which I don't always recommend to do, justify it.
Right.
Show me why. Okay. Oftentimes, we don't just throw out numbers. If you're a good broker and you underwritten the property and you've looked at the comps and you've looked at the status of the property and you've prepared it for disposition, which is super important, and you know the status and you've done the reports and you've done the due diligence, and that's the price you quote. When somebody comes in, it's a qualified buyer. So I will start and say, usually they don't come in that much lower because they understand the job that you did and they've underwritten it themselves. And if this deal is not for them, they will find another one. So coming in very extremely low ball, $1 million less, that's a big number. I want to know why. What happened that you're deciding? And if somebody wants to get a higher return, then my question back to them would be, what are you going to do about it? Like, you want to get a higher return, that's fine. That's not what the market is kind of saying right now. But if you want a value add deal, maybe this is not the deal you want. If you want value add potential, those specific deals that we would call them in retail the credit tenants, or a core deal, where you know that this is it's a low return but a safe investment. And sometimes you have other deals that are a little riskier, but can offer you higher returns. And risky is usually the tenants, but also has to do with the asset class, the location that it's in, the market that it's in. So I kind of lost track of what I was.
No, it's good. No, it's good. Just thinking through, that buying process, right? When you have numerous buyers and you're on the broker side, making that determination. I think you laid out numerous great things there. Like the broker doesn't just throw out a number. You all have thought through this. There's many different things you've taken into account because you've seen hundreds and hundreds of deals in that market, most likely, and understand the value. You've come to a calculated number. And hopefully as a buyer, you're doing the same thing, right? You're coming to a number that's calculated. And if it is somewhat lower, you can give an explanation, right? You can give a calculated explanation. Shmuel, this is why we came up with this number. I hope this makes sense to you, and really have a discussion about it, maybe, or feedback. And there may be something that we didn't realize as the buyer, right? I would imagine that probably happens often as well. There's just something that wasn't realized or known about the market or a specific deal that changes those numbers in a big way. Right.
Yeah.
And so anything as far as that communication level with buyers through the negotiation process, anything that would be helpful for the listener to know specifically, let's say the listener is that the new buyer, to the new buyer to the block, that's coming in to say, Shmuel, we're just getting to know you, but you know what, you've got a property listed that we would really like to have a shot at. I tell you, well, how do they stand out? I'm sure that's what many of them are wanting to know. How do they stand out amongst the other buyers, Shmuel, that you may have done a few deals with already, that you have that relationship with? Somebody, they got to get started somehow, right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start from the beginning. Buyers out there understand the appraisal process, capitalization approach, replacement value, and comparison approach. Those are usually what we use to arrive at a price. And if you look at almost any website to say the appraisal process, it'll give you these three approaches. A capitalization approach would be the income and price with the cap rates. The comparison is other marketed deals that are similar. And the replacement value would be if we just torn down the building and now had to build it back up again, how much would that cost? Those three together, usually we arrive at the price. Know how to underwrite the deal and understand the deal, understand its main points, and know if it's a good deal for you or not. Because if somebody comes in and he says, is it a good deal? Is it not a good deal? Do I want this? Do I not want this? I don't know. Maybe I should just send in the offer, see what happens. That's not very serious. And you will have that track record of people saying, okay, he's just throwing in offers, we're trying to negotiate it, and nothing's really happening with it. And I think that's detrimental. And as a broker as well, I've worked with the buyers. And today I realized they weren't that serious. And I would get my connections, and I have them, and I would say, hey, I have somebody interested, and they would do the work and send me deals. And then they would say, no, we're not interested. That's not what we wanted. So know what you want and have an exit strategy. And having an exit strategy is critically important. When you buy a building, know how you want to exit. And you know what, even if the exit is having it on your will in the future, that's still an exit strategy. That's something that you need to plan it out. If you want to have a long-term hold, a short-term hold, and that's relevant also to the mortgage. If you want to use leverage, you're going to have a call date. When is that call date going to be, and how do you plan to figure that out? It's super important. A way to stand out is having a good offer, a well thought out one as well. Sometimes it's worth it in a competitive market and a good deal not to send over an LOI, rather a PSA agreement that's well drafted and ready to go. Say, hey, this is my purchase and sell agreement. I'm not even negotiating with an LOI. I'm putting in an offer straight, on the table, willing to sign now and go into escrow. A lot of times, the first thing we look at is the financing contingencies. Because when you have a purchase and sell agreement, you have different contingencies. Most contingencies are, they're logical. Due diligence, environmentals. You got to make sure all the units are good to go. You want to know the building. You're not getting a cat in a sack. Always look at the financing contingency and try to understand how they're trying to figure out the financing. Once you see a financing contingency, then you know that this could take a long time to close. Syndicators, on the one hand, sometimes pool in the money and they have cash to come into the deal. Now that depends on how you syndicate the deal. Some syndicators, they have a deal that they want to do, they put it under contract, and now they try to gather the money. And they're on very short time frames, and it's very, very complicated. Other syndicators put together a fund, and that fund is ready to deploy capital into a deal. It's much better that way because when the deal presents itself, you're ready to go. But it's a lot more difficult to raise money that way because you're kind of asking people to give you money when there is no deal. And people don't like to lock up their money somewhere. Because if I would be a passive investor and you came to me and you said to me, hey, come give me money for a deal, and I just give you $250,000, and all of a sudden a different deal presented itself, I would say, wow, my money's locked up with you. And then we would have like this animosity a little bit, would be comfortable. So you would need to know how and where and who to gather money from. Yeah.
That's a great point as far as, doing a fund specific deal or deal specific fund versus a large, what some people would call a blind fund, right? Where investors, like you mentioned, they don't know what deals are going to be purchased in that fund or what they're really investing in, other than just trusting the operator and what you say the fund is going to be buying. No doubt, relationship is key there. On the broker's standpoint, though, if somebody comes to you and let's say a very experienced operator that's doing a deal specific fund, they haven't raised the money yet, but you've seen them raise the money time and time again. You know they can. However, somebody else is making the exact same offer that's doing a fund, and they already have the money in the bank. How much does that sway your just feeling, or even most sellers on which buyer they should go with?
I think it's a case by case scenario.
Sure.
I think it's difficult to come out and say, I would do this or I would do that.
Of course. Just in general, or just thinking through that a little bit.
Thinking through, I mean, it's a great question. It also depends on the seller, because we want the best for the seller if we present the seller or the buyer. And if we do both sides, we want to have the transaction happen. The goal of the broker is to put the sides together. Sometimes as a broker, you can speak with the seller and be like, "Oh, that's stupid as well. I can't believe it." And then you go to that buyer and be like, "The seller is a little concerned with your price. He kind of take away all the bad. We keep what's important, and that's how deals happen sometimes, because we're able to kind of play with it. It's not play with it. I'm looking for a word that I completely forgot how to say."
Yeah, you're kind of the negotiator. You're kind of you're keeping face, right? I mean, yeah, I understand. It makes it at times easier than working directly with a seller. No doubt about it. When you have that person who can kind of represent each side, in a better light, maybe. I think it's interesting. You talked about, sending over a well drafted PSA instead of a letter of intent. And showing you're very serious, showing you've already, you're way ahead. You've already thought this through. It's well drafted. You mentioned, what are a couple tips maybe, and what makes it well drafted to you as a broker, or maybe some things that you've seen other people do, other buyers that just made it not so well drafted? It's like, okay, this is not a serious buyer here.
Okay. I honestly think a PSA is a piece of art. And when you read through it, you kind of know that this has been thought out. You see the deal points, you see the time frames, you see the due diligence period. There's consistency in the deal. They really understand the main points. They know what they want, rather than a PSA where it's kind of like all over the place. I want a 45-day contingency period on the due diligence. I want to have 20 days. I want to make sure that I get, oil rights, this rights, that rights, and easements, and you're like, okay, what does he want?
Yeah.
But you kind of see it. You kind of know it.
Yeah. What about how does someone go about just even coming up with a well-drafted PSA? And I'm asking you to go through it, but I just think somebody that's new and they're thinking, where do I even start? Do you have any suggestions on anything like that?
Absolutely. Use a lawyer.
In I assume a lawyer that's been there and done that, right? Or a lawyer that's familiar with commercial real estate.
Use a good real estate attorney to negotiate and help you draft that PSA agreement, at least for the first, I want to say every time, okay? Because I don't want to say anything else, because it is super important and we always use attorneys. I've seen PSAs like crazy, and I always use an attorney, because sometimes, I can tell you stories of things that happened. It didn't happen to me, but it happened to a friend of mine. I'll give you an example from the retail world, just to understand how important it is. In retail, when a tenant signs a lease, then they get oftentimes what's called tenant improvement allowance, where the landlord gives money to the tenant to build out. And sometimes the deal really leans on that because the tenant needs that money. Now it's worth it for the landlord because he is building out a space, but he's getting someone to lease it out for 10 years. So it does amortize over time. And inside the PSA, or inside the lease, excuse me, when we were negotiating it, there was a miss where there was very strict criteria that the tenant had to stand by in order to receive that money. And it was very, 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 like very thin line of when he would and when he wouldn't. And because he didn't, stand by that criteria, he never got the money.
Hmm.
And an attorney would have been able to identify that very quickly. There's tons and tons and tons of points that you can miss. Sometimes you need a bill of sale. When you transfer property, that's real estate, that's one thing. But if the property comes with ovens and refrigerators and all this equipment, sometimes a bill of sale is needed. I don't know when it's needed and when it's not. An attorney does. That's just one point. There's tons and tons of them, though.
Having that experienced team member, right? I mean, it's not just having that experienced broker that you have that relationship with, but it's also the real estate attorney that you have that relationship with, and it's helping you through that process. Hopefully, they've drafted hundreds and hundreds of those, agreements or purchase and sell agreements, right? Shmuel, do you have any predictions for the real estate markets here over the next 6 months, 12 months? Anything you expect?
I know the CEO of Kimco, Connor, he was asked, I think it was like a year ago, if he has any predictions. And then they read it back out to him a year later when they interviewed him what his predictions were. Now, he was right, and I hope I will be too. Real estate is definitely resilient, so it's not going away. I am seeing a lot of office deals. I am seeing a lot of retail deals. If the industry is going to change, the industry is always changing. The industry is always evolving. In retail, we have something that ICSC coined the 4 F's of retail: food, fitness, fashion, fun. And those are not going to go away. They're going to stay no matter what. Multifamily, there will always be people that will need a place to live, especially multifamily. And I know that we are in huge demand and supply is extremely low currently in multifamily. That's a good space to get into because of the demand. Office, when people talk to me about office is not going to go away. We might see a hybrid, and I'm quoting Marcus Similar Chaps, Hissam Naji, and I agree with him completely. A hybrid model where people will come into the office and maybe be able to stay at home once or twice a day, but the office culture. And I also coined to somebody that there used to be a problem when people work at home and you deal with confidential information. That's kind of iffy. I wouldn't want my deals, or the ones that I kind of want to keep under wrap, to go into people's homes, and who knows what's going to happen to them. I certainly think office is going to come back, and it's going to come back very strong. Commercial real estate is the way to go. It is the industry to be in. And I think we're going to we are passing this pandemic, but we're going to come out the other side stronger and better fit to deal with future, complications that might happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just like you all, you've shifted to add multifamily, and now you can do retail and multifamily, or where before you may have steered more away from multifamily, right? So it's probably improved your all's business and deal flow and all those things. Shmuel, what about some daily habits you're disciplined about that have helped you achieve success?
Read the book, Atomic Habits. It's a great book. One of the greatest things that I heard, I don't know if this is a daily habit. My daily habits, I go to sleep between 11:30 to 12:30, and I wake up between 5:30 and 6:30. So I like to get 6 hours of sleep. Some people can work with 5, some people can work with 4. I've tried them all, and 6 is my magic number. I'm not going to lie to my own body. This is what I could do. I love to read. I do read a lot. But one of the greatest things that I've heard, and I'll go back to that book, he mentions over there that sometimes when you want to accomplish a goal, you're saying, I'm at this point, my goal is at this point, now I have to get there. And he says, don't do that. Be at your goal. Be who you want to be. If I want to be a successful person, don't say, okay, I want to be successful. Now I'm not successful. How do I get there? Say, I'm successful. What would a successful person do? If I was right now a millionaire, what time would I wake up? I am a millionaire right now. When am I waking up? How am I acting? How am I dressing up? How am I presenting myself? Not like I want to be, rather I am. Now that you're at this position, at this point in your life, be that person. And once you are that person, all of a sudden the mindset changes and you become who you want to be a lot quicker. And I think that's great advice.
No doubt about it. I was going to say it goes back to mindset, and you got to it there. It just changes your mindset when you think about what that person would be doing and just start doing those things, right? Yep. Figuring those out. What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Oh, I love what I do. Honestly, that is it. I love what I do. I enjoy it so much. I just have a blast meeting people, talking to people, putting deals together, signing contracts, and putting in the work, even the difficult, like when the going gets tough, I smile and I say, this is a fun industry to be in. Surround yourself with good people. If there's anybody in the world that tells you you can't, put that person away. You don't need people like that. You can, it's possible. Anything is possible. Just put your mind to it. Some more good advice from Steve Schwarzman. And he says that if you want to be a big success, you got to take on the bigger problems first. Because we can already solve the small problems. Everybody's doing it. But if you want to have that, break into the game, find that property that's not a good deal and make it into a good deal. Good deals are not always born. Sometimes they're created. Make that into a good deal. Figure something out. Be creative about it. How can I make this deal happen? And when investors come in, and this is a syndication show, and the investor is going to come in and say, wow, he was able to do that. I want to work with someone like that. That's pretty impressive. Everything is possible.
Well said. Yeah, I would say more deals are created. You find the good deal, but you also have to find a way to make it a good deal often, or find something that somebody else didn't find, right, or see. Shmuel, how do you like to give back?
How do I like to give back? Well, first of all, before I got into real estate, I studied parental counseling, and I have a club where I help parents out with their kids sometimes. So I do that for free. I enjoy giving this advice and helping parents, and I think it's super important. And to me, it's critical because I've always had a father who, since I was 4 years old, he was telling me this, you're so talented. You could do anything you ever want. I don't know what you'll ever choose to do, but whatever it is that you're going to do, you're going to be good at it. And today, by the way, I play music. I could do anything. And it's because that's what I believed. I'm just good at everything. I chose to do real estate, but I studied psychology, I studied business, I studied this, I studied that. I could do a lot of things. And I think for parents to be for them there for their kids, and for me to give that advice and to help them out, I think it's super important. That is one of the biggest ways I give back. Another way is just trying to help people out as much as possible, connect with people, give advice. I've sat with someone who told me he wants to go get into real estate. How much would it cost to get a consultation? I was like, nothing. What are you talking about? Cost. I have time on my calendar. Let's sit down for an hour. Let's see how I can help you out. And I think that's important, to help as much as you can. And I've had friends that said, hey, I have this deal. Do you know someone who'd be willing to buy it? And it's not my deal. But how long would it take me to send an email and say, hey, connect? It took me exactly 3 minutes of my life. 3 minutes. I'm not going to ask for money for that. If I have to work on something, it's my job. I get paid. This is my compensation. But something that would take me a very short time.
No, it's a great just a mindset, way to look at it, being willing to help and being willing to do those things. Connecting people. I mean, they're going to remember that, right? And hopefully even be willing to help you in the future also.
That's
Shmuel, thank you just for your time and giving back to us today, and really some specific parts of the acquisition process and working with a broker through that process, some different viewpoints that brokers may have, just working with sellers and buyers. Just a great information for the listener and myself. Tell them how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Absolutely. So I have a LinkedIn, I have Instagram. My Instagram is more of like a personal page. I didn't mix it with business. I thought it was nice to see my personal side and how I just love to play golf all the time. So people laugh about that. Just look up my name. It's the same everywhere. Shmuel Siegel on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great for me. I'm very active there. And reach out. Let's make a conversation. And I'm, again, always happy to help, always happy to give advice, always happy to see how I could be helpful.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.